All right, these are notes number 15. It is section 12-6 from the book, page 760. It's learning how to solve by completing the square. Make sure you have your paper set up. We should have done that in class already. And the warm-up should be done, which the warm-up helps preview what we're doing for today and review how to factor perfect square trinomials. So here are the notes. Go ahead and copy this. Pause if you need to. Okay, it says first, figure out how to make a perfect square trinomial. So from the warm-up, like you can still see this one, x squared minus 6x plus 9, that is a perfect square trinomial. What number would have to be in the boxes to make these perfect square trinomials? So you have to try to find the pattern. Okay, so again, pause if you need to. This first one is x squared plus 16x plus what? Then x squared plus 18x plus what? X squared plus 26x plus what? And x squared plus 30x plus what? So the part that's left that we need to add to make it a perfect square trinomial, it has to just be a number and it has to be a perfect square. So remember, some of the perfect squares are like 1. 1 is a perfect square. 4, 9, 16, 25. So how do we know which perfect square goes here? So it does depend on that middle term. So I'm just going to use this example up here since we still see it. It is -6 and then plus 9. So we know the square root of 9 is 3. So always think, what's the square root of that last number? So this one is 3. And then notice that this is 6. All right, let me look at this one. From the warm-up, the perfect square on number 1 was 36. So the square root is 6. And notice that that is 12. So again, this one was the square root was 3. And then it's a 6 in the middle. Here, the square root was 6, and it's a 12. Look at this one. The square root of 49 is 7, and then it's a 14 in the middle. So I hope you're kind of seeing a pattern. It's all about finding a pattern. So again, how do we make the perfect square trinomial? This is really important. In case if you forget, you'll be able to figure it out again by looking at an example. So if we have 16 in the middle, I have to think what would be the perfect, the perfect square. If you're thinking 64, you are correct. So that would be 64. The square root of 64 is 8, and it's a 16 in the middle. Like here, the square root of 9 is 3, and it's a 6. The square root of 36 is 6, but it's a 12 in the middle. It's doubled. So the square root of 64 is 8, 16 in the middle. You can probably figure this one out too. If you're thinking 81, you are correct. The square root of 81 is 9. 9 times 2, or 9 doubled, is 18. So what about when we get bigger numbers, like 26? That's not as easy. You can always use your calculator. And I would just do 26, find half of that. It's 13, and then square it. So press the little square button, it's 169. So I'm going to just double check before I write that down. So I'm thinking it's 169. I'm going to square root it, it's 13, and then times 13 by 2, that is 26. So what did I say it was? 13 squared is 169. I hope I can fit it here. 169. All right, so I'm going to use that same pattern here for the next one. So it's 30. So I'm going to do 30 divide by 2 is 15. But then I square it, and it's 225. Okay. So we're finding the pattern. And here it is. You can write it down. So if you're not quite getting it yet, maybe look through it again. Look through the warm-up examples also. But the pattern is to divide the middle number term by 2, divide by 2, and then square it, and that's what the number that you add. That is how you get those numbers. That's how you get those. Divide the middle number by 2. So I'll just write it out right here for one of them. 18 divided by 2 equals 9. And then you square it, and that is 81. I'll show the work for that one too. 30 divided by 2 is 15. You square it, and it is 225. Okay, so finish copying that down. Make sure you understand the pattern, and then move on to this next part with the steps. Actually, let's just do a couple steps at a time. All right, so start copying that down. Pause whenever you need to. All right, so now we are going to use completing the square to solve. So let me show a little more. Go ahead and pause as you need to if I go too fast. Okay, so here are the steps. The first step is to complete the square, just like what we were seeing up above, like what number to add to make it a perfect square trinomial. That's what we need to do. So we will complete the square, add that number to both sides. So I'm just going to do one step at a time and show you guys how to do that. So here we have an equation. Notice that up above, let me just show you. These were not equations because there wasn't an equal sign. We were just practicing making it a perfect square trinomial. 1, 2, 3, 3 terms, so it's a trinomial. It's a perfect square because the last term is a square, like 64, and then the middle term is the square root times 2. 8 times 2 is 16. So that's how all of these ones are. So that's what we're trying to do right here, but we are solving because it has an equal sign. So in this case, it's not set equal to 0, but that's okay. Any of the numbers, if there's a number here, you want to actually move it to the other side. We don't want these to equal 0 when we solve, and you'll see why as we go. All right, so we'll just do one little thing at a time. So the first thing is to complete the square and add that number to both sides. So we look at this middle term. Don't worry so much about the minus sign, but we're looking at the 12. I'm actually just going to show that right over here. So in order to find out what do I have to add to make it a perfect square trinomial, you might already know, but these are the steps you always follow. So again, don't really worry about the negative, but I'm looking at 12. I divide it by 2, and that's 6. And then I square the 6, and it's 36. That's the number. So I always take the middle term, divide by 2, square it, and then that's what I have to be adding to both sides. So I will just circle that in green and then add it to both sides. So when I rewrote it, I left a little space so that I can write plus 36. And I'm actually adding it to the other side. I'll add it to 64, so plus 36. So now I have a perfect square trinomial. X squared minus 12a plus 36. And then it equals the other number, which was 64, but I have to keep equality, so I have to add 36 to both sides. Okay, now let's look at the next step. The next step says to factor the left side, factor the trinomial. So x squared minus 12a plus 36. It does factor. You don't always have to write this, but I'm just going to show you. It does factor to be x minus 6 times x minus 6. But if you remember, we can just write that as x minus 6 squared because there's 2 of them. So we write it squared. And that's actually how we need to write it in order to solve by the way I'm going to show you. So just make sure you always remember you want to write it as like x minus 6 squared or whatever it comes out to be. But make sure you've got the squared. Don't write it 2 times, use the square. And then you do have to simplify on the right-hand side. 64 plus 36, that would be 100. All right. The next step, it says square root both sides. So I want to go ahead and now go square root the left and square root the right. Don't forget plus or minus. So it's really important. Don't forget your plus or minus. So square root the left side, square root the right side. Don't forget your plus and minus. What happens when we square root the left, since it's a binomial squared? Remember from like before when we would solve by square rooting, the square root sign, oops, that doesn't work. That cancels out with our squared right there. Square root cancels the square. So all I'm left with on the left, I'm not going to use parentheses, I'm just going to write x minus 6 and then plus or minus. In this case, we can square root 10, but sometimes it won't actually give us a whole number. So just remember, you just do the number, square root button, and then the answer is 10, but maybe it comes out to be a decimal, and that's okay. I'm pretty sure your Math Excel homework tells you to round to like, I don't remember how many decimal places, but just pay attention. It is okay with decimals for your answer. All right, so anyways, we square rooted both sides. The square root cancels the square. And then here we have to square root 100. Use a calculator if you need to. That one's easy though, you should know it's 10. We're actually not done yet. Step number 4, simplify and solve for x. So let's see. Simplify and solve for x. Okay, and that's our last step. So what we can do is you can, oh, I forgot to show. So you want to add 6 to both sides. Always write it in front of the plus or minus. It's getting too squished looking, sorry. Oh no. Okay, sorry, let me take this one step at a time. So we want to isolate the variable, so add 6 to both sides, and that cancels. And what I was saying is you always want to write the plus 6 part, whatever you're adding or subtracting, put it in front of the plus or minus. So I end up with x equals 6 plus or minus 10. And that's good, but that's actually not the final answer. We do want to simplify that. So I'm going to just show you that this actually means 2 equations. It means one equation, 6 plus 10, and then the other one, 6 minus 10. So don't change the order or anything. It's really just one time you go 6 plus 10 like that, and then the other time 6 minus 10. And that's how we get our 2 solutions. And remember, these solutions would be the x-intercepts if we graphed it, and you could easily graph this equation. You would go back to the very beginning. That's the easiest way probably. X squared minus 12a. You would have to subtract the 64 to the other side though. So you might want to check it. Just try to graph that and see if these are the x-intercepts. X squared minus 12a minus 64. See if, let me move that over. See if the x-intercepts come out to be x equals, it would be 16 and negative 4. But right here, I don't care about the order, but remember, if you're writing it as a solution set with braces, you would put your negative value first, comma, and then the whole number, or sorry, the positive bigger number like that. So you can write your answer multiple different ways. If you're writing them as x-intercepts, remember it would be negative 4 comma 0 would be one intercept, and then the other one would be 16 comma 0. So there's so many different ways to write your solutions as x-intercepts, as just x equals the numbers, as a solution set using braces, but any of those would be correct. Okay. All right, so we're going to do some examples. I wrote them right there, but I want to go through the steps one more time. So the first step is to complete the square, figure out what to add it to both sides. Factor the left, it's the trinomial. Square root both sides because it's squared, so then you square root it, so then it cancels. Then you add or subtract to get the variable alone, and then you just have to simplify that. Remember, one time you add, one time you subtract, and just keep it in that order. 6 plus 10 and 6 minus 10. And then just pay careful attention in your homework on Math Excel which way they want your answer and what, like you might possibly have to round your decimal, so pay attention to that too. Okay, so let me just, that doesn't look very good. I'm going to just circle that in a color. So the 2 answers were negative 4 and 16. You could write them as x-intercepts. Remember, graph on Desmos real quick just to see. On any of these, you could graph on Desmos, but you do have to get all the numbers on one side and either put y equals or just don't put y equals. Don't put equals 0. It comes out weird if you put equals 0. So x squared minus 12a minus 64. See what that graph looks like? See if these are the intercepts. Remember, there's multiple ways to solve. All right, so let's practice. So I'm going to follow these steps. I'm going to go through it a little bit quicker because I think that helps you see the steps flow more easily. So what I need to do is I need to add something to both sides. The way I figure it out is I'm going to do a little scratch work on the side. I'm going to do 16. Oh, that pen doesn't work and I keep trying to use it. I'm going to do 16, divide it by 2, which is 8, and square it. So I'm going to do some of that mentally. I just realized you couldn't see that. So I'll zoom out. So I do 16, that's 16, divide it by 2, square it, and I get 64. So I'm going to add 64 to both sides. Add 64, and I have to do 64 plus 59. I'm going to not skip, but just not show it as long to show you guys it doesn't have to be that long. So now I'm going to factor it, which is step 2. I'm adding 64 to both sides. On the left, it's going to be m plus 8 squared. On the right, I just have to do 64 minus 59, which is 5, right? I can't think today. 64 minus 59. Make sure you get it right. I'm not sure, so I just used a calculator. You got to make sure you get it right. It's 5. Remember also, my next step is to square root both sides. Maybe I can color coordinate this. So square root both sides. When I square root, this number has to be positive. If it was negative, my answer is no solution. So just keep an eye out for that. That might happen. Don't forget your plus or minus, square root of 5. All right, so square root both sides. And the square, the m plus 8 squared, cancels the square root. So all I have left on the left is m plus 8. On the right, it's plus or minus the square root of 5. Now I'm at my very last step. I have to simplify and solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 8 to both sides. That way m is alone. Remember, you put that negative 8 in front of the plus or minus. All right, so the 8's cancel, and we end up with our answer, m equals negative 8 plus or minus square root of 5. Most likely, MathExcel doesn't want that answer, but that is simplified. What you would do is use a calculator and you would put in, I'm just running out of room a little bit. So you would put in to the calculator negative 8 plus the square root of 5, and then you would put in negative 8 minus the square root of 5. And I'll see what those come out to right now. So in my calculator, I do 8 negative, and then plus 5 square root equals. Okay, so negative, I probably have to round to the hundredths place. So it goes 7, 6, then it's a 3. So the 3 will not make the 6 go up. So negative 5.76. And it is approximate. You should try to use those little wavy equal signs. Negative 5.76. And then the other one comes out to be 8, and then I have to make it negative, minus 5 equals. Okay, so negative 10.23. The digit after the 3 is a 6. That rounds it up. So negative 10.24. Negative 10.24. Approximately equal to. Okay, so those are the two numbers. If you actually calculate it, but this expression also shows the solutions. And remember, if you were to graph this on Desmos, just add the 59 to the other side, m squared plus 16m plus 59, and those are the 2 points approximately where the x-intercepts are. So you can check that and see. All right, now number 2. Notice that on this one, then it is set equal to 0, and there's a plus 19. And we don't want it to be plus 19. If it's a 12 right here, I would think 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 squared is 36. I want that to be 36, not 19. So we have to just real quick Instead of like setting it equal to 0, we actually want to get rid of whatever number might be there. So we are subtracting 19 to both sides. And then I'm going to write m squared plus 12m, leave a space, equals negative 19. And then I have to add to both sides to complete the square. So this just had a little first step that this one didn't have because it already had the number subtracted over there. And then same thing on this example, the 64 was already on that side. So I just had to do this first little step, and now I can complete the square. We have 12, which we've done before. We can do this mentally. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 squared is 36. So I have to add 36 to both sides. Add 36. Following my steps, I just completed the square. I factor the left. That would be m plus 6 squared. So remember how to factor those trinomials. It's really important. It should be easy. All right, and then on the right, combine those. So 36 minus 19 is 17. All right, following our steps, now we have factored. We have to square root both sides. Square root the right. Don't forget your positive and negative. And the square root cancels with that square. So now we're left with on the left just m plus 6 equals. On the right, I can't square root 17. I can use my calculator in a little bit to simplify it and round. So m plus 6 equals plus or minus square root of 17. My last step is to just subtract 6 to both sides. Remember to write it in front of the plus or minus. And so you could write your answer like that or use your calculator to simplify. I'm running out of space right here. M equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 17. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, that's so small. Or I can use my calculator and I would do negative 6 plus the square root of 17, and that would be m is approximately equal to negative 1.8. It would round to 8 because that 6 makes it round up, so negative 1.88. And m is approximately equal to, so then I would do the negative 6 minus the square root of 17. And that would be approximately negative 10.12. The 2 stays a 2 since the 3 doesn't round it up. Negative 10.12. So you can, for me, you can leave your answer either way. MathXL, I believe it wants you to get decimals as your answer. That's why I'm showing you how to actually work it out. So again, just follow through the steps. Do your best, try your best. Just retry these examples if you need to, and then try your MathXL to practice. And if you guys need any help, we can go over this in the beginning of our next lesson. And don't forget to do your 3 questions on the left and a summary before you turn these notes in to Google Classroom.